I gave her everything. A home, a name, a life she never could have imagined. She called me Big Sis. I called her family. And when she asked for $5 million, I said yes, without a second thought. A week later, I found photos of her and my husband on my yacht, toasting with my wine, smiling like they had won something. That was the moment I realized. They weren't just stealing from me. They were stealing who I was, and I knew exactly how to take it all back. I took her in when she had no one else. She was just 10 years old, orphaned, terrified, and barely speaking. Her parents had died in a car accident 3 weeks before Christmas. No relatives came forward. No family friends stepped up. The state was ready to place her in foster care when I intervened. I had known her father peripherally through business. He was a decent man who'd made some poor investment choices. When I heard about the accident, something in me stirred. Maybe it was maternal instinct I'd never had the chance to explore. Maybe it was guilt over profiting from his failed ventures. I gave her a home, a name, and the kind of life she never thought she'd have. My estate had 37 rooms. She could have chosen any of them, but she picked the smallest one closest to mine. She would knock on my door at night, afraid of the silence, afraid of being alone again. I would let her crawl into my bed, her small body shaking with nightmares I couldn't chase away. To me, she wasn't just a girl in need. She became family. She called me Big Sis, even though I was old enough to be her mother. The age gap didn't matter. What mattered was that she felt safe. What mattered was the way her face lit up when I came home from business trips, arms full of gifts from places she'd only seen in books. I meant it when I said I'd always protect her, and I did protect her. From everything. From the curiosity of my social circle who whispered about my sudden acquisition of a child. From the lawyers who suggested I formalize the adoption for tax purposes. From the loneliness that had been eating away at my own soul for years. Over the years, I gave her everything. A private education at the best schools money could buy. She struggled at first, her early trauma making concentration difficult. I hired tutors, therapists, specialists, whatever she needed. When she was 14, she wanted to learn piano. I bought her a Steinway. When she was 16, she developed an interest in art. I turned the East Wing into her personal studio. Access to my world meant introducing her to people who could shape her future. Board members became her mentors. CEOs' daughters became her friends. She attended galas where million-dollar deals were struck over champagne and small talk. A seat at my table meant she heard everything. Business strategies, political maneuvering, personal vendettas. I trusted her with information that could topple governments or destroy fortunes. She absorbed it all with these dark eyes that had seen too much too young. I even trusted her with secrets I never told anyone else, like how I'd built my empire on the ashes of my father's bankruptcy. How I'd married my husband not for love, but for his connections and his name. How I sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, terrified that everything I'd built would disappear as quickly as it had come. She would listen without judgment, offering comfort in the way only someone who understood loss could. When she graduated from Harvard Business School summa cum laude, I threw her a party that made the society pages. She was 22, beautiful, brilliant, and ready to conquer the world. I was so proud I could barely contain myself. For the next 3 years, she worked alongside me, my protégé, my successor, my daughter in everything but blood. She had a gift for reading people, for finding their weaknesses and exploiting them. She could negotiate deals that left hardened businessmen wondering what had just happened. She was everything I had hoped she would become. When she turned 25, she came to me with tears in her eyes and a dream in her voice. It was a Tuesday evening in March. The cherry blossoms in my garden were just beginning to bloom. She found me in my study going over quarterly reports. She knocked on the doorframe the same way she had as a child, hesitant but determined. She said she wanted to start her own business, a real estate company built from the ground up. She had identified emerging markets, undervalued properties, opportunities that others were missing. She wanted to prove that she could be successful on her own and not just live in my shadow. The presentation she gave me was flawless. 43 slides detailing market analysis, financial projections, competitive advantages. She had thought of everything. Every question I raised, she had an answer for. Every concern I voiced, she had already addressed. She asked me for $5 million. As a loan, she insisted. With interest. With a formal contract. She wanted to do this the right way, the professional way. She didn't want anyone to say she had been handed success on a silver platter. I studied her face as she spoke. The earnestness in her voice. The fire in her eyes. This was what I had been preparing her for her entire life. This was her moment to fly, and I gave it to her. Not because I had to. The money meant nothing to me. I spent more than that on art. I never looked at cars. I never drove houses. I never visited. Not because she deserved it. Although she did. She had earned this opportunity through years of hard work, dedication, and loyalty, but because I believed in her. And because love when it's real is never about the money. I transferred the funds the next morning. $5 million, clean and simple. She cried when she got the confirmation. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. She promised she would make me proud, promised she would pay me back with interest, promised she would never forget what I had done for her. 1 week later, I received an envelope. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing the architectural plans for a new hotel in Dubai. My assistant brought in the mail, sorted as always by priority and importance. Most of it was the usual correspondence. Business proposals. Charity requests. Social invitations, but there was one envelope that didn't fit the pattern. No return address. Just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. The paper was expensive, the kind used for wedding invitations or funeral announcements. My name was written in blue ink. The letters perfectly formed, but somehow menacing. Inside were photos, 12 of them. Color prints professionally developed. High quality. Taken with a telephoto lens from a distance, but clear enough to leave no doubt about what I was seeing. Her, my protégé, my daughter, my betrayer, my husband. The man I had shared a bed with for 15 years. The man whose name graced the letterhead of my companies. The man who had stood beside me at her graduation, tears in his eyes as he applauded her achievements, on my yacht. The serendipity anchored off the coast of Santorini. I had been in Tokyo that week, closing a deal that would add another $1 billion to my portfolio. I had told them both where I was going when I would return. They had wished me luck, drinking my wine, a 1947 Cheval Blanc that had cost me $40,000 at auction. I had been saving it for a special occasion. Apparently they had found one, touching each other like I never existed, his hands in her hair, her legs wrapped around his waist. Their mouths meeting in kisses that spoke of familiarity, of an intimacy that had been building for months, maybe years. They weren't discovering each other. They were celebrating something they had been hiding. They looked happy, free, triumphant. In one photo, they were raising their glasses in a toast. In another, she was wearing my jewelry. The diamond necklace my grandmother had left me, the one I had never let anyone else touch. In the final photo, they were in my stateroom on my bed, surrounded by the silk sheets I had imported from Milan. I stared at those photos for a long time. I sat in my leather chair, the one my father had bought for his first office, and I studied every detail. The way she threw her head back when she laughed. The way he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in years. The way they moved together like choreographed dancers who had practiced their routine in secret. But I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't break anything. I just poured myself a glass of that same wine. I had another bottle in my private collection, and started thinking. You see, they thought they were smart. They thought I was just another rich, distracted wife. Too busy building empires to notice my husband's wandering eyes. Too focused on board meetings to see the way my protégé looked at him across the dinner table. Too trusting to ask questions about their sudden interest in spending time together. Too soft to notice the subtle changes in their behavior. The way they would stop talking when I entered a room. The way they would exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The way she started asking about my travel schedule with just a little too much interest. Too proud to admit I'd been fooled. Too vain to consider that the two people I trusted most in the world had been plotting behind my back, planning to take everything I had built and claim it as their own. But I didn't get here by being naive. I had clawed my way up from nothing. I had fought battles that would have destroyed weaker people. I had survived betrayals before, though none had cut quite this deep. I had learned long ago that in business, as in life, you trust no one completely. You verify everything. You keep insurance policies, and I had been keeping insurance policies on both of them for years. While they were playing lovers on stolen luxury, I was tracing their money. It took me exactly 4 hours to uncover the extent of their deception. The $5 million hadn't gone towards starting a real estate company. It had been funneled through a series of shell corporations, eventually landing in a Swiss account that both of them had access to. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. I found records of private investigators they had hired to dig into my finances. I found emails discussing my travel schedule, my business meetings, my vulnerabilities. I found receipts for the yacht rental, because of course they hadn't been stupid enough to use mine without permission. They had rented an identical vessel and staged their celebration on international waters. Tracking their lies was even easier. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel registrations. They had left a paper trail that a first-year law student could have followed. Love apparently had made them careless, and quietly preparing my revenge became my new full-time occupation. I called in favors I had been saving for decades. I activated networks I had built over years of careful cultivation. I set in motion a series of events that would unfold with the precision of a Swiss watch and the inevitability of gravity. The company she started was built on land I already owned. She thought she had been clever identifying undervalued properties in emerging markets. But those properties were undervalued for a reason. I had been manipulating the market for months, creating artificial scarcity, driving down prices, waiting for the right moment to strike. The land she had chosen for her flagship development was part of a larger tract that I had acquired through a subsidiary. She had spent weeks negotiating with my lawyers, never realizing she was buying property from me. The contracts were ironclad. The moment she defaulted on any payment, which would be soon, everything would revert to me. The funds she moved were easily frozen once I made the right calls. Swiss banks are very accommodating when you've been a client for 25 years, and your deposits have helped finance half their operations. A single phone call to the right person, a whispered suggestion about suspicious transactions and potential money laundering, and suddenly their accounts were under investigation. The yacht was still mine, always was. I had never actually given them permission to use it. The crew who had staffed their romantic getaway had been paid from my accounts charged to one of my many expense categories. They had assumed I wouldn't notice a few $1,000s in operational costs. They were wrong. Within a month, his board seat was revoked. The other directors had been waiting for an excuse. He had been coasting on my reputation for years, contributing little beyond his name and his connections. When rumors began circulating about his infidelity, about his involvement in questionable financial transactions, about his possible ties to embezzlement, the board moved quickly to distance themselves. Her company dissolved before it ever really began. Without the land, without the funding, without the credibility that came from association with my name, her grand venture collapsed like a house of cards. Her investors fled. Her employees found other jobs. Her dreams evaporated like morning mist, and every contact they thought would protect them disappeared. The society friends who had embraced her as my protégé suddenly became unavailable. The business associates who had courted her favor found reasons to decline her calls. The mentors who had guided her career discovered pressing obligations elsewhere. They lost everything they thought they stole. Their Swiss accounts were emptied by legal fees and penalties. Their reputation in our circles was destroyed beyond repair. Their dreams of building an empire together crumbled under the weight of their own greed and stupidity. He moved out of our house on a Tuesday morning, taking only what he could carry in 2 suitcases. I watched from my bedroom window as he loaded them into a taxi. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. The confident stride that had once commanded boardrooms was gone, replaced by the shuffling gait of a defeated man. She left the country entirely. I heard she was teaching English in some small town in Southeast Asia, living in a 1-room apartment above a noodle shop. From protégé to exile in the span of 6 months. It was almost poetic. And me, I stayed right where I was, same estate with its 37 rooms and manicured gardens. Same champagne served in crystal glasses that had belonged to my great-grandmother. Same empire stronger now than it had ever been cleansed of the rot that had been eating away at its foundation. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. He tried to claim half of everything, citing his contributions to my success. My lawyers buried him in paperwork and precedent. In the end, he walked away with a settlement that wouldn't buy him a decent car. I kept everything that mattered. The houses, the businesses, the respect of my peers, the satisfaction of knowing that I had outplayed players who thought they were playing in my league, minus 2 snakes. People ask if I regret giving her $5 million. Friends who know the whole story. Business associates who witnessed the aftermath. Rivals who took notes on how efficiently I had dismantled 2 lives. They all want to know if I wish I had been more careful, more suspicious, more protective of my assets. I don't, because $5 million bought me the truth. And honestly, that's the best deal I've ever made. The truth about loyalty and how easily it can be purchased. The truth about love and how quickly it can turn to betrayal. The truth about trust and how foolish it is to give it completely to anyone. But most importantly, the truth about myself. About my own strength. About my ability to survive anything, to overcome anyone, to emerge victorious from even the most devastating betrayal. $5 million to learn that I am exactly who I always thought I was. Ruthless when necessary. Generous when appropriate. Unforgiving when betrayed. And absolutely unstoppable when someone tries to take what's mine. That knowledge is worth far more than $5 million. It's priceless.